Let's talk about what's new in streaming analytics with the first quarter of 2024 in Cumulocity. First up, we've got the new ability for Analytics Builder to work with all inputs. So you can create a single model that works with all the items in the platform, all the data in the platform that can be used as inputs, and create a single model that works with them. So the example I've got here is I've got a single model that looks at the temperature, fragment and series data coming in from any measurement from any device, and will raise an alarm when the temperature exceeds 100. So it's an easy way to create a single model that works regardless of the devices you've got, or the device groups, or the smart groups that pick up the devices. You can create a single model that works with everything. Next, we've got the ability for Analytics Builder to work with predefined selection lists. So if you're using template parameters to allow the user to parameterize your Analytics Builder models, you can now specify a predetermined selection list for the user to choose from. So in this example, I've provided some values to help the user choose the temperature threshold, but you could easily, just as easily, provide other selection lists, such as lists with strings or textual values in, as well as numeric. The constant value block has been updated, so it now supports floats and booleans. This makes it just a little bit easier to use with more use cases, and you can use it in combination with blocks such as the logic and aggregate blocks as well. If you're using EPL apps, then there's now a new sample based on requests from many customers that shows how to create an app that receives and processes update notifications. So it's not many lines of EPL code, but it's a common request when people are getting started using EPL, is how do I respond to when my managed object or when my events or measurements are received or updated. So that sample should help people get started very quickly. We've got a nice UI improvement when you're selecting your input source inside Analytics Builder. We've now got a filter bar which allows you to determine the devices you're selecting as inputs. So if you have a lot of devices, you can now use the filter to restrict what you're seeing when you're searching for an input source. And if you choose other, then that other category is not about your generic devices, but it's about other items in the platform which can be used as an input source. It might be a file or other managed objects in the platform. The diagnostic zips are a really good way to download the current state of what's going on in streaming analytics, so you can use them to help you debug your applications. And the diagnostic zip used to be in the canvas at the bottom of the screen. We've now moved it for cleanliness reasons over to the right drawer on the right of the screen, just beneath the support section. There's a new addition for Analytics Builder primarily to help with the accessibility. So if you are struggling to read visually an Analytics Builder model on the screen, then you can copy and paste the JSON code to a clipboard and then view that in a notepad or into a text editor or JSON editor, and then you can have your favorite screen reader or your favorite tools to modify or to read that JSON code, and then you can paste it back in from the clipboard into Analytics Builder with any changes you've made. So primarily used for improving accessibility, but also a nice improvement if you want to manually edit your analytics builder models outside of Cumulocity. We've improved EPL based on feedback from customers and developers. There's quite a few improvements here. First of all, listeners and stream listeners which raised an exception, which if you did not catch could cause the monitor to terminate, and the EPL app would silently stay inactive, and you might not spot this. It was okay if you caught the exception using a try-catch block, but more often than not, new developers in particular, were writing code that did not always use a try-catch block, and any exceptions would prevent their application running. So now, if an exception is thrown, we stop handling the current event, and the monitor is still there to process future incoming events, which helps your applications be more robust. For concatenation, you can combine different data types now. So I've got a nice simple example of a text string saying welcome plus a number 2024. So that makes concatenation easier. We've got some new convenience methods if you're using sequences and dictionaries, and the example I've given here is the new getOr method, which allows you to get an item from a sequence at an index, and if it doesn't exist at that index, then you can return a default values instead. If you're using sequences, you can now use negative indices to reference items from the end of a sequence. So a -2, a -2 index refers to the penultimate item in that sequence. If you're creating sequences of any, there was a slight quirk in the past where you had to cast the first item as an any to indicate that the sequence was to be constructed of any's. You now don't need to do that. You can now just use the data types without forcing the casting of the first item to be an any. And if you're creating actions, functions, then the result does not need to be processed. You can actually call the action without catching without handling the result. Just makes the code a little bit easier if you don't need the result every time. And we've got a new base64 EPL plugin which allows you to do encoding and decoding from base64. Makes it a bit easier to handle binary data within EPL. Again, with the robustness, we have prevented the isCreate and isUpdate actions from throwing exceptions if they fail. Now they simply return a false, which makes it easier to write an application which doesn't use the try-catch exception handling, and it should improve robustness as a result. And if you're using HTTP connectivity, then you can now use the max response options to restrict the size of the responses coming from the server. So you can manage really large responses from a server that you weren't expecting. And there's a few ways you can use that, either by configuring the transport or within the predefined event definitions, which make working with HTTP a little bit easier from EPL. And that's it for this Q1 release. Thanks for listening.